Data Storytellers, Advanced Business Communications and Storytelling. Here again, Synthesis Part 2. So the last one, we started digging into the details. We got cut short, so we're going to pick up where we left off, but we're going to do a quick recap of what we covered. Dave, welcome back. Always a pleasure, sir.
Always a pleasure to be here, right? So we're in this synthesis chapter. We're building this playbook, right? So in the last episode, we started to break the ground, right? Like you said in the intro. And we're starting with what we're calling subordinate meetings, right? And so what is subordinate? Just again, to remind everybody, or if you're just jumping into the middle for some reason, subordinate as a contrast to superordinate is when the data storyteller, in this case, it would be me, or in your case, when you're selling into a business, it's you, when we don't have the dominant frame, to borrow Clap's language, or when we don't have the organizational or positional advantage. Okay, so classic example, I, as even VP of analytics, I go over to VP of sales and I say, hey, you should change your sales process to reflect this thing I found. I am in the subordinate role. Because, again, borrowing Clap's example, I can be ignored with little to no consequence. And the opposite of that is when I'm in the superordinate frame or the superordinate role, which is typically management discussion. So when I'm VP of data science, no matter where I am, I'm still the VP of data science. But when one of my data scientists come and talk to me, now I'm in the superordinate role because while I wouldn't, I can technically ignore them without consequence, right? Using the Clappian language here. And there's, again, I have positional advantage. If I say we're doing a regression and they want to do random forest, they have to do the regression. So you have to be mindful of those things. So that's an example, or that's not an example. I guess that is an example, but that's how we're defining subordinate and superordinate in this context. And we're starting the playbook with subordinate, again, where we have the weaker frame, because that's probably 90% of the job, right? I've never been in an organization where like the CADO has the superordinate frame relative to anybody else with a C in their title. And I've even seen CADO be like third in line to the CEO, and you're still subordinate to somebody who's probably like fourth in line or fifth in line, but because they're in a revenue center and they're so important, it's like, oh wow, like I'm watching this guy who could be all brimstone and hellfire with us, but then he's got to be meek and pussycat with this guy who's technically outranked, but hey, he funds whoever funds the other has all the real power. So here we are, subordinate. Anything you want to add to the definition before we go kind of recap our scenarios and dig in?
Yes, I think something again help if anyone picks it up from here for any reason. A good example of a subordinate positioning would be a classic sales scenario. Someone tries to sell a solution, sell an idea. Now that helps because some people might be thinking, oh, okay, so is it about the job title? Is it about the rank? Well, it's more about you are selling an idea and you're up against a decision maker. In a way, would you say that is actually correct?
Because it's perfect. Yeah, who's got the money? Who's got or who's got the currency that you're going after? Right? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be literal money. It could just be authority, could be whatever. But they've got the thing, and you want it. Yeah, you're in the subordinate role.
Exactly. So you try to sell an idea. You try to get a commitment out of that individual, and you don't have, I would say, formal authority over the individual. Okay, excellent. And that's why we actually mapped out even a classic sales scenario. And now we're zooming in on data analytics professionals specific scenarios. And we got all the way to where did we get last time? Exactly.
So we identified 4 kind of like archetypal scenarios. The first one was launching a new capability, which is probably the most fun you're going to have in the data science job. The second one was persuading management to incorporate your new capability into the core process. Now, there's a slight distinction there because in the launching a new capability, it's more of a peer-to-peer thing like, hey, I'm the VP of data science. We just rolled out a bunch of models. hello, director who runs a sales team, check out this cool model. Hello, salespeople, check out this cool model, right? And it's a different pitch than, hey, vice president of sales, could you please incorporate my model into your operations? So now everybody has to use it. It just becomes the way that we do business. Okay. And in one case, I'm trying to convince the users that I got a cool thing. In the other case, I'm trying to convince the user's boss or boss's boss that I've got a good thing. So slight distinction, albeit intimately related. I think we were kind of zigzagging between them last episode, if I recall correctly. Three other ones that we identified. The first is the staking an impact claim, which is probably the least pleasant part of the job. But essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, hey, because my team exists, because of the widget that I created or we created, you're better off, the company's better off. I'm going to claim an ROI for my time here. And the reason why that's often contentious is because various levels of incentives to either zero you out or disagree or just to be difficult, or some people are just somewhat innumerate and they don't understand how statistical experiments work. And so, again, I will ignore you without consequence because it's no skin off my back if I say, no, you actually don't have an ROI. Doesn't affect the finance department, doesn't affect the HR department if they say we don't have an impact. So I'll give a little bit of that as well. The fourth scenario is the discovery session, which is the predecessor of the capability launch, which is where you're trying to get information out of people. And I think the reason why this is subordinate is not necessarily because it's literally subordinate, where you're talking to somebody who has some sort of positional advantage. Although you could argue they have information, you want the information, so you are subordinate. But for this one, the unique twist was it's to your benefit to embody the subordinate posture, because if you are that harmless entity, people tend to be way more candid, possibly to their own detriment. Right? I shouldn't. You see someone and you're doing a discovery session, and they're like, I don't know if I should tell you this, or this might be too much information, or please don't tell anyone else. If you get one of those on the lead in, you're about to get something juicy that, again, if you treat that with the utmost care, it makes you so much better because you're going to find the problem under the problem. And then you can solve the right problem. And it was wow, these guys are amazing, which makes your impact claim easier to stake. And then the last one was the one that you introduced a few minutes ago, which is just the generic sale, right? And so this is other, right? So if you're either launching a new capability peer-to-peer, you're trying to get your capability incorporated in the process, you're trying to stake an impact claim, or you're trying to do discovery. Those are, in my mind, I'm constantly running through those scenarios in my life, but then it's probably stuff that comes up where you have to be subordinate, but it's not necessarily in those four. I couldn't think of any, but then you're let's go with the generic sale. So the generic sale is a catch-all. They have something you want. You need to figure out a way to get it out of their hands and into yours, metaphorically speaking.
Absolutely. And I would even go then, and this is a fantastic way to conceptualize it and also to make the classic sales scenario a catch-all, because it does integrate many different elements. So every sales process, first of all, the sales process, depending on what you're actually selling, it varies in terms of the decision cycle and how long will this take to align everyone, to get everyone bought in and to complete the transaction or the commitment at the very end, however that looks like in your own scenario. It literally can range from a 30-minute interaction to a year. You know, depending on the solution. But each will need to have certain elements, including, for example, discovery. The breadth and the scope of it will change depending on who you're talking to, how many people you need to talk to. Then you will need to present an insight. You will need to present a solution. Again, depending on how many stakeholders, what you're actually selling, what is the size of the commitment, it will change, but it will have the same anatomy at the same time. So I think it's actually great that when we go through these very specific scenarios, the sales roadmap will really tie everything together and reinforce.
Agreed. Yep. And you always fall back on that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on the discovery piece, you said that, oh, that's an interesting one because it will be to your benefit to assume the subordinate position. Think about it this way, like a good consultant would be that. And there is a client service provider relationship there. And the service provider, it might not be like there is no hierarchical authority that the client holds over the service provider, but still there is a service provider who is providing the service, who in that sense, it's more on that side of, hey, I'm here to help you. And think about a therapist, right? You go to a therapist to help you with a problem, while the therapist will still like lead the interactions, but that person is the more subordinate in that scenario. Right. So those are the only additions I wanted to put there before we dive back in.
No, I love it. And so getting back in, so we were talking through playbooking and where we left, not where we left off, we covered this concept of universal prep, right? And so before we resume playbook and we go scenario by scenario, which we should be able to get through all the scenarios with the balance of the time we have, just a reminder of this universal prep concept. So all of those scenarios that we talked about, so we've got 5 archetypal scenarios. There's just certain best practices that are more or less always going to work, right? I mean, they might be overkill given maybe you have a very small interaction about where you're gonna be subordinate, but again, they're never going to hurt you. It's just, maybe you could have spent the time on something a little bit better. So, universal prep. 1, an agenda for the meeting. Okay? Nothing makes you easier to ignore without consequence than having no agenda. It's like the simplest, dumbest little behavior change adds 30 seconds to your day, but always do it. I just did that. So somebody asked me to do an analysis for them, agenda for the meeting. Even though it's like they asked for it, they know exactly what it is. The subject says discussing the analysis that you asked me to do, right? It's like very, very obvious, but I still have an agenda. It's just a good habit, right? You're never going to regret having one, but it's very easy to regret not having one, especially if it gets rescheduled. Like I remember when I was at CVS and calendars were constantly being jostled. Meeting gets pushed out 2 weeks. You're like, shit, what are we going to talk about? Agendas at least help make that durable. So then you've got road testing materials. Okay, take them out for a test drive. At a minimum, you could potentially spot where you're not getting through clearly. At best, you're engineering some consensus before the meeting starts. So I used to work for a guy, his name was Steve, and he used to say there could be nothing new in the meeting, right? Meetings are not times for new things. And it's like, oh, that's actually like super smart when you think about it, right? At first, it doesn't, like, it jars you a bit. It's like, why? Like, we're here to discuss. Should not some of this be new? But then you're like, no. Get the yes before the meeting starts, so it's just kind of like back slaps and like when can we start, as opposed to trying to get the yes in the real time. So that's the advanced version of road testing, is you can start to work your way. So if you're meeting with the VP, meet with all the directors, get their feedback, get their buy-in, because if the VP's got to make a decision, they're probably, again, everybody wants to de-risk everything in contemporary working environments. They're going to turn to the directors. What do you guys think? And if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. So make sure you've got them all there. Because if they have objections, take care of them if you can, or realize that it's gonna die on the vine and die off screen. Don't die in the big room, die off screen. Right? And then finally, just rehearse. Right? This heuristic I got early in my career, it was like for every 1 minute of talking, you need 5 minutes of prep, which means a half-hour meeting is like 2.5 hours of prep. That, again, it starts to become, that relationship probably breaks at some point, but it's good to prep, right? I have meetings with my boss every week, and it's a 1 hour meeting, right? But I'm not speaking for an hour straight, but I give it a good solid 30 minutes of prep every time. Make sure that we have a good meeting, because I don't ever want someone to hang up and be like, oh, that was a waste of time, right? So again, prep, rehearse. So those are universal. You will never regret doing those, but The only risk is, again, you might have over prepped, which means, oh, darn it, I could have watched an extra episode of Naruto last night and I didn't because I was prepping. That's really all it is.
Very common problem, and I hear it all the time.
Especially for me, yeah. Darn Naruto or like Dragon Ball, if you're like
whatever was your boat,
yeah.
you know,
whatever
it's Naruto or Dragon Ball,
yeah, whatever
either
your
the
favorite anime is. That's the only thing that people in data science are watching, by the way.
Those are the two, A or B.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you actually last time, you know how even in the data storytellers masterclasses, whether it's an online or a face-to-face, we always like showcasing the case study that anchored the conversations, followed by the discussions right on set. So that means that no one had to watch it as a homework, but we did it together. And this kind of ties into that Amazon strategy, which again, it's probably true, but might be an urban myth, but still the idea that instead of giving people homework and then everyone is busy and they show up on the meeting and they actually haven't done the homework, they haven't watched the video, they haven't done the research. In the meeting, there's time carved out for everyone to go through the one-pager and get on the same page. What do you think about that philosophy? This came up in one of the meetings. That's why I'm asking.
No, I adore that. And I've spoken to an ex-Amazonian who said at least when they were there, that was the practice. Now, I have a friend that currently works at Amazon. I don't know if they're still doing that. Again, some of these things don't scale beyond a certain end size, right? Like the 2 pizza rule and all this other stuff that they have. That's why, I've moved from giant 300,000 person company to 800 person company, and like you can just tell like there's certain things that we can do differently here just because we don't have the layers and the gyrations that come with it. There's benefits to both, right? But I would be curious to see if Amazon could scale that. I think they have like over 1 million people that work.
Yeah, at this stage,
yeah. But the reason I like that, there's 2 reasons why I really like that. So first, getting a one-pager is not trivial, right? Like I can't remember where it comes from, but there was a guy who, like, it's a famous quote where it's like, I'm sorry that this letter is so long. I didn't have time to make it shorter. And it's so counterintuitive, but as somebody who has written a book, is doing infinitely more verbal than quantitative work these days, just because like I've moved into that role where I don't, I sing for my supper with email and PowerPoint more than code. Like verbosity is not to your advantage. Everybody wants pithiness. Everyone wants shorter, more to the point. And if you're able to effectively convey complicated stuff in that one pager, because it's obviously it has to be complicated because otherwise it would have been an email. It has to be complicated, otherwise it wouldn't be, okay, we got 8 people around the table for an hour. What's the cost of this meeting, right? If everybody around the table is making $100 to $200 per hour, and you've got 8 of them, the company has now spent $1,600 on this, up to $1,600 on this meeting. We get that ROI. So it has to be complex. It has to require multiple perspectives. And you could get it down to one page. Like, you've got to be a weapons grade communicator. Or if you're not, you're going to get there. Same thing with like PowerPoint. Like if you look at the deck I made when I started consulting and the deck I made at the end of my consulting journey, it's like night and day. Right? And even that was strong. And then I had a guy come in that did like 8 years at McKinsey, and he even leveled me up even further. So like there's all these different ways to communicate, right? So that, I love it just for that. It forces people to be better at asynchronous communication, which is like the 3rd chapter of our playbook. The second is everyone's looking at the same screen. So we've talked about you could watch 2 different movies on the same screen. Well, if you do it independently, oh, here's the pre-read that no one looks at. Now you don't even know if they watched it. And if you're in the meeting doing the presentation in real time, you don't necessarily know if they're paying attention. You might lose somebody. But if they're like, it's a tight one pager and you've got whatever it is, 10 of these 60 minutes to read it, you have undivided attention. You have everyone looked at the exact same thing. So everyone's probably reaching a similar understanding. There might be divergent opinions, but at least we're all building on the same foundation of our divergent opinions. Love the practice. I wish as a working culture, we would just move to it, but there's a lot of inertia that makes us cling to the old ways of like the real-time presentation. But if we can get to that, I think the world would be a better place to make it sound corny, but like
talk about world peace. Yeah, it's about the one pagers.
That's all we need. We just need 1 pages. We'd have peace in the world and no hunger. Just 1 pagers.
And also, this really ties into good practice storytelling, because even if you're telling a story, what do you do first? The first narrative segment is always about bringing everyone on the same page. What is the way of the world, so that we're all inhabiting the same space, so that it does serve that purpose. And again, it ties into preparation. And I think that quote is attributed. It's one of those, when there are quotes that are attributed to Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky. Maybe neither of them said it, but one of them said, I think it's Mark Twain. And the quote was something like, sorry for writing you a long letter. I did not have time to write you a short one, or something like that.
Yes, if the quote is in English originally, Mark Twain's probably your best bet.
True.
He was like phenomenal. His brain was just a wonderful thing. Man. He came up with some great stuff. So I don't think you're ever going to go wrong attributing something to him.
Yeah, I believe it was Mark Twain.
Like, if it's clever, George Orwell had a lot of zingers too, but I digress.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so preparation, road testing materials, and rehearsal all ties into the preparation. And then we moved on to the launching new capabilities. Yep.
And so without over retreading, because I want to be mindful that we're probably like 30 minutes in already.
Yeah.
The launching new capability, your goal is to razzle dazzle. Your goal is to get the oohs, the ahs, right? You want them to be excited. Why? Because you are asking them to change. And there is nothing worse than change, right? Nobody hates change more than somebody who's adequate at their job, right? Like, if you suck at your job, you're probably willing to try something new. If you're a killer at your job, you're probably willing to try something new. But that bulge in the middle, the people that are adequate at their job, like, you're asking me to go through a learning curve when I'm sort of just like treading, and I'll use sales, right? I'm at between, let's say, 80 and 120% of my quota. I don't feel the pain, right? I don't feel the pain for the change. So people that are terrible, whatever it takes. And then you got your best. They're like, yeah, this is going to get me from 150 to 160. Hell yeah, brother, sign me up, right? But that bulge in the middle is the toughest. And that inertia, like, I know how to do this. It's like, okay, but like, my goal is to level you up, right? So I need you to try that. But that's your biggest blocker, right? And you think about what you're asking them to do. Like, they've literally done whatever it is that you're augmenting dozens, hundreds, thousands of times. Right? Like, we just launched a model that says, here's the likelihood of successfully closing a deal. Not do you want to. Not how much is it worth to you. Strictly likelihood of fulfillment. Right? And that is a sea change for an organization that has historically been very focused on the value, not necessarily the likelihood. And so this is a big change event, right? But if you want to increase the fill ratio, the total win rate, like, this is exactly the model you need for that. And so I'm going through this right now. We're going through the change, and it's getting the same sticking points that you expect. Right? So, hey, like, but this is low on your model, but I think it should be high, because in my mind, this is a great opportunity. And I'm like, you're right. It is a great opportunity. That's not what I'm trying to answer. And then you see a light bulb go off. But that change management, that's where, like, that everybody's immune system all at the same time was like, no, this is different. I don't like it. Crocodile, bleh, safe to ignore. Because you can ignore. You don't need my models. Company worked great for like 10 years before I came here. If I got hit by a bus, they're going to be fine. So it's clearly like, but if you're that person trying to go from, okay, I typically win 35% of the time, I want to win 45% of the time, this will show you where the higher likelihood to win. So that's literally what we're doing. That's the change management. But that's the trick. because my oohs and ahs, I can make all kinds of cool stuff. Computers can do anything you want, but you've got to impress upon someone the way I'm working today is not as good as the way I could be working tomorrow if I adopt this new capability. That's the crux of what you're doing. All right. So how do we win? Right. So we talked a lot about clarity is king, repetition is queen. You want to talk about a case study in clarity is king, repetition is queen. Everybody's initial visceral immune system reaction is, I think this is a measure of quality, not a measure of likelihood. And so clarity, it needs to be clearer. And one of the things that we learned was the iconography that we were using was unclear. Right? So we're going to potentially look at a way to change the visual cue so that it helps to cleave that bond that people are making between qualitative and quantitative. And then the repetition is queen. I had to do a rapid fire. I think I did maybe like 4 trainings in 4 days. I might have reached like 600 people with it. But now you can see, oh, I get it. Oh, I get it. Oh, I get it. They needed to hear it probably 2 or 3 times before it like really sunk in. Right. And it is what it is, right? Like, it's just this, people are busy. This is very different. This is orthogonal to how we've done things in the past. And so you just use a couple of reps. But now that they've got the reps, that resistance is already starting to abate, which is great. Now we just got to change the iconography, and I think we're going to be good. So we're going to let it run for about a month. See if there's still any confusion. If it's still confusing, we will flip to a new icon set. But if the repetition was enough, we might just leave the icons the way they are. Because there's a little bit of a cool branding because we use the same icons in every context. So that came from Dave's team.
And they can make
that's a trade-off. Yeah, so so it's like consistent branding so they know it's a data science capability versus inconsistent but potentially clearer in context. Mm-hmm. So we went with the former because we thought that would help. There'd be one neck to choke and you'd know which neck to go after. But maybe the latter would have been better. I don't know. I'm not my expertise as a UX designer, that was beyond my reaches of competence. I'll get there though. But that's that. And then tell the story, right? Framing it in a narrative. And I think the narrative for this one was the company's trying to bump its fill rate up. And so this is literally like the red carpet to a higher fill rate. You need to contextualize that because, you don't, if winning was calories, you don't necessarily want to always eat easy calories. Sometimes you want to have like your vegetables and stuff, right? So this needs a balance, but it's like an express lane to fill rate. So that was the story. Like, hey, our fill rate's been kind of stagnant. Here's a way to bump it up. Even if we don't get any new business, if it's just, or like, new sources of sales opportunities, the pipeline stays the same size, you can still get a lot more yield on the same pipeline because you're just going to win more of it. Less effort wasted on things that are never going to fill, never going to close, right? So those are the 2 things that we did already. And then finally, we get into some of the other ways you could do this. So one is and this is where the new territory, right? Put up an alert on the screen. Finally, new content. Finally,
we've been just repeating stuff so far to get them.
Our brief summary of about 50 minutes. Okay. Maybe they can just watch this episode and skip the last one. I don't know.
I mean, it's functional repetition. The ideas are sinking in.
Yes, repetition is queen. You're right. So there's a greed play here. Okay. Now, this is one of the reasons why I love working with salespeople and sales organizations, because it's so obvious when it's working. And these people want it to work, right? So, hey, what's your current fill rate? What do you currently make? And how much more would you make if you personally, forget the company, what would you personally make if your fill rate improved from, say, 30% to 35%? That is a 15% improvement to your earnings. What would you do with a 15% raise? Oh, I'm about to listen to Dave. That's what I'm about to do, right? So, like, you could put it in those terms, and I haven't quite ironed out exactly like the most tasteful way to appeal to commission, but like you hint at it, right? It's like more sales for the same hours worked. It's a 15% raise.
It depends on the organizational culture too, but I think with salespeople also you don't need to be, I think, that like careful. You know, you can actually say, okay, the 15%, that's the trip to, you know, wherever the Bahamas or whatever. That's the upgrade to the convertible Mustang. I don't know, like.
Yeah, I think the risk is if I say it's like getting a 15% raise, they hear I'm getting a 15% raise. That's why you have to like thread the needle. Because people tend to hear what they want, but that's a low-hanging fruit, and you can further sell this. Again, we'll tap into Voss, right? You can use those like no questions, like, hey, would it be crazy to think you could improve your fill rate if this machine could tell you where you were most likely to fill? They're like, well, no, it's preposterous. Why would you even waste my time with that question? There you go.
Yeah, it's an easy no.
And it creates some intrigue, right? Because I almost wish I led with the greed, because that would have potentially got them to sit forward, and then I could have told the story, and then I could have introduced the concept. So I think in my own like forensic assessment of how I did and like what I would probably do next time, I think I might even try leading with the greed. Because I think that'll get them that'll break the ice or get them into hot cognition, right? Like,
exactly, get them to lean in, pay attention, and also they are thinking on the right track of, okay, no, this is how I want you to conceptualize it, and then the solution that will make it happen comes later anyways. Yeah.
And then the last part here, again, when you're trying to get it off the ground before we get into like objection handling, which is where you have like a tremendous amount of expertise, is social proof. Launching a new concept, social proof is so awesome, because then I'm not selling it to you. Your buddy who does the same thing that you do is selling it to you. And so we did this by working with people that are well regarded in the sales org to say, hey, can you kick the tires on this? Give us some feedback. And we're generally getting positive stuff. And so we can say, hey, we can invoke their name if they're not in the room, or like ideally we get them to raise their hand and be like, oh, I'm using this and it's awesome. So we got a couple of leaders to say, no, this leaders as in high performers, not literal management, to say, no, this is good stuff, and we're getting some value. So that is so important to help smooth out launches. And that's why everything, you know, either has a pilot, because the pilot becomes the social proof, right? Like when I was at CVS and we had geographic territories, I might grab Florida, right? My buddy Raul, can you test this? Tell me what you think. Or like Pennsylvania, my buddy Mike, can you test this? Tell me what you think. And then that becomes the social proof to go into the next market. Right. So
and
those are like,
actually also with those, like the social proof element, it works so well also for a storytelling reason. I know that I'm always coming in with, hey, the storytelling angle here. The storytelling angle here is that person can say that, hey, this was my situation. You know, I was struggling with X. I was worried about Y.
Oh, yeah.
I had a tough bottleneck here. Then Dave and the team came, right? This is what we've done, and this is how things improved. And so right away, people can relate. They can say, oh, yeah, that's me. That's my pain. Actually, that's my concern too. Maybe that's my objection, because they can even say, and it's very powerful. I've had testimonials and it's a really honest testimonial. You know what? Dave and the team came in, I was skeptical. I didn't know what this whole algorithm means, what it can do. You know, I didn't even care, to be honest with you. That was the pain. But this is what we've done. And this is a transformation that took place. So with the story, it ticks so many boxes. Relatable, speaking the same language, transformation taking place, objections being addressed there, because they can say, you know, I had no idea what they were talking about. You know, with it's over my head, to be honest with you. I don't speak this kind of data science analytics language, but I took the leap of faith, and guess what? It paid off. And, you know, I just got my Mustang convertible. Right. Maybe they can even say that story. And it's so more authentic coming from them. And that's the reason why it works so well.
Right. Even if their narrative, just to magnify that, even if their narrative perfectly matches the hypothetical, illustrative narrative that you would have spun up yourself, doesn't matter, because it's not hypothetical.
Exactly.
Right. Like it doesn't take omniscient, cosmic deity level intuition or clairvoyance or whatever you want to call it to be able to say, if you make better decisions, you will have better outcomes. Like, that's not special. And so you could say, oh, imagine you're having trouble finding new prospects, and then, oh my God, there's a prospect discovery tool that the data science team built, and oh my God, it sorts by likelihood to buy, and oh my God, it sorts by lifetime value. That's a cool thing. And look, now you don't have to go through 100 people to get one sale. You can go through 10 people to get one sale. You're going to get 10x the yield on your time, hypothetically. But then you have one dude who's like, actually, I tried the thing and he's right. Like, it took, I'm getting 10 times the volume because I'm only pitching to high likelihood buyers. It's like, I could have told you that, but because you told them that, it's so much more impactful because it's real. It's not a hypothetical, even if it fits the hypothetical perfectly.
And I'm even thinking that there's, because I'm just coming to this realization because all these tools are available, is that there's an anatomy to a good testimonial, to a good witness, and it's a very specific, simple structure too. So maybe we'll add that as well as a tool, the back of the synthesis of how can you structure these stories and how can you use them to effectively evangelize your work. Right.
Yeah, you can say, hey, I've actually done this before. Like, hey, I'll write the script for you. Can you just approve it?
Yeah.
Seriously, yeah. So I'm going to make it as easy for you as possible, right? Or I'm going to quote you because I'm presenting. Are you okay if I quote you for these 3 things or whatever?
Did this happen? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then, that was literally, we did that in at CVS. We had a guy say that the tool was like Disneyland for sales execs, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get that made into T-shirts." But like,
so it's so funny.
Can I put your name on that? And he's like, "Sure."
So that was such a powerful example that I'm telling you that's the number one specific thing that we still hear also in the data storytellers community. And I'm not even kidding. I'm parroting it all the time because it's such a good way to get the message across. Right? The difference between people being apathetic about the solution that you build, or they hate using it, they don't care, they ignore it, no, it's Disneyland. So it's like such a vivid image, and people love it. They also use it again. When Dave mentioned the Disneyland for salespeople.
I'm trying to make Disneyland here, by the way. Like, we're actively working on that.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, I'm building. I guess this would be like Disney World.
Disney World,
yeah, Disney World. But everything's got a dark side, right? And so let's go back to what we're doing, right? So we're launching a new thing. We've used the rhetorical question, the no question to get past the defenses. We're being clear. We're repeating. We're telling a story, and we got social proof. Everything's lined up, right? But the root barrier is change. People don't want to change. And so that's going to come up in a ton of different flavors, but underneath it all is change resistance. So they might say, oh, current state works, or I'm doing fine, or whatever, right? All different synonyms for what eventually basically boils down to, I don't need your widget, right? And so as we were prepping for this series and like getting to the synthesis and really trying to hey, give us your time, we're going to give you some tools, right? There's a couple ways to attack this. So the first thing is all inside your locus of control. What utilization or adoption target is realistic? And you need to sell that. You as the data storyteller need to sell that to whomever it needs to be sold to. What I mean by that is the following. I have, at the current company, I think we have 10 offices. Okay. Now, it's not true, but let's just pretend that all of the offices are uniformly distributed. So one office is 10%. While I would love to have 100% adoption, I probably won't. I don't think anything has 100% adoption. There's probably a dude using custom graph paper because he doesn't trust Excel, even though it would make his life 20,000 times easier. So what's the right adoption target? 70, 80, 90? And it kind of boils down to roughly what's the value of the behavior change. You can kind of forecast that. So like, okay, if I believe that my model, when used correctly, is going to lead to a minimum 5% improvement in sales wins, how many deals and how many users do I need before I hit a sufficient ROI? So maybe I need to hit 10 times my team's cost. So if my team costs $1 million per year, okay, how many extra deals do I need in order to hit $10 million of incremental sales, right? And then how many users do I need to hit that number of incremental deals? And then how many users exist and what's that ratio? So if I need to get to 10 million, let's say that's 1,000 deals. The average rep does 10 deals per year, so I need 100 users. And how many users do we have? Well, we have 300. Oh, I only need 33% adoption, technically, in order to hit my numbers. So that's actually what you're aiming for. And then everything beyond that is gravy. Now, 33% adoption sucks in a vacuum. But if you can credibly say, hey, I got 33% adoption, I hit my 10x ROI, let's use that to try to get the laggards. Or, hey, why don't we use that as proof to go get the senior person to make us business as usual, which is our second scenario. But everything I just said is fully within my locus of control as the data storyteller. Okay? Just don't aim for 100%, and the problem goes away. But you may be thinking, well, that's a cop-out. Okay, fine. So that's like the Jocko Willink, okay, I'm going to take ownership and blah, right? All right.
Good.
So, yeah. So let's go. Yeah, good. It's not 100%. So now let's go to the other angle, or the other way to look at it. This is thing number 2. And the thing number 2 is it's an ego problem. You as the non-person, right? So non-salesperson, non-HR person, non-finance person, non-whatever, because we're analytics people. You're rolling up and you're like, hey, I know better than you do. I got a thing that's going to make you better. Like, how dare you? No, seriously. Let's just own that for a second. How dare we? Right? Even sometimes when I'm doing presentations and I'm like, how many deals could a sales rep possibly look at in their entire career? And I'm able to look at 50,000. I'm able to look at every deal the company's ever done. And I could draw from that. The whole company's looking at maybe like 10,000 per year, right? And you're only part of the company. So what, you get 100 per year? And how long are you gonna be at 5 years? 500? You get to look at 500. I get to look at 50,000. All right? In a sense, like I know more than you, but then I've never done it before. So do I really know more than you? Well, maybe not, right? At any time they could be like, all right, Smarty, why don't you try picking up the phone and sell one of these things? Do I could try, but like I'm not going to do a good job, right? So like we should own that. Like,
based on my vast data sets.
Right. How dare I presume to say I can make you better at your job, right? So that's a perfect feeder for the ego to be like, get out of my face, bro. Okay. But let's also take so that's like the charitable thing. Like, okay, your ego rejection is justified. Now let's make it uncharitable. Your ego is holding you back, right? Ryan Holiday, the ego is the enemy. But if you know, if you can attach it to an ego, right? Now this is an assumption. The assumption is one that it's ego driven. The second is that all of our assumptions of how the world works and all this other stuff is like valid. Because if they're like, I reject your model because you have a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world works. Okay, now our bad. We need to go back. But that means that we did something wrong in discovery or whatever. So we're just going to get to the point where like the model is useful and they're rejecting it because they're turning down something that would force them to change. So what are the tactics to deal with this? Status quo is fine. So you go with Cialdini. Okay, Cialdini says, go right to the ego. Appeal to the ego. What does that look like? Well, hey, there's no doubt that you are effective in the current system with your current approach. All I'm trying to do is help everybody who's not as good as you kind of get to your level. So help me out here. Like, what's the best way to kind of scale you if it's not this? Because we need more of you. So all I'm basically saying is, listen, we know you're a superstar. but we need to get, you're sitting there at the 60th percentile. I got some people sitting at the 20th percentile. How can I help them grow? This is not a zero-sum game. There is no reason for you to see them as a threat. So, because everyone has exclusive clients and exclusive
territories and
products and territory. Yeah, everything is nice and exclusive. So you have no reason to fear anybody taking your lunch. So how can I scale you up? And then that typically can help to at least make them stop detracting you. They might not adopt you, but they will stop. The vocal detractors, especially if they're known for being above average, that's devastating to your ability to persuade.
That's kryptonite. Yeah, that's adoption kryptonite.
Yes. Then you've got, so now you've kind of opened them up a little bit, right? You've worked the body a bit. The hands are open, right? You can go direct with a VOS attack, which is like, hey, would you be opposed to partnering with me so that we can essentially help level up the laggards? Okay. Would it be unreasonable for us to maybe base the second gen on what you think, your approach, some of the variables that you think about, right? Because every model is going to be short variable, right? Our current one has got like 13. Maybe you can help me figure out 14 through 20. Right. So if it looks like that appeal to the ego, like, of course you're amazing, you don't need this, but like, would it be ridiculous if you help me make it better? Okay, now they're in. Now they're your co-conspirator. If the ego thing whiffs, right? So they didn't open up their hands, they're not ready for the chin punch. Then you don't use Voss, you go to McCraney. See, we're bringing all the books together. One example.
A synthesis.
Yeah. So you got to be careful, because if you say why, you're going to go back. Like, that's the direct punch, but their hands weren't open, so you're going to get countered. So you go with McCraney and you say, how do you know it works? So it's like, what aspects of the current method are working for you? How do you know if the system's as good as it could get? Right? The goal is to try to figure out what they're holding on to in the current state. Now, typically data science is additive, we're not subtractive. So we're not replacing things usually. I mean, everyone's mileage will vary, everyone's journey will vary, but I'm eliminating something from your flow and replacing it with my data science widget. It's always been, here's a data science widget that can help everything be better, right? I've never been in the painkiller business, I'm always in the vitamin business, which is a difficult business. It's harder business.
It's a bit harder business,
right.
For sure.
I want some creatine. Sorry, I don't have it, right? But so there's no threat of like, I can't let go of Google Sheets. Like, that's not a thing that I'm gonna affect. So it's really like, what is it like? You can't say it this way, but you're trying to, like, what are you afraid of? Or like, why is this bothering you? Because all I'm showing you is a thing that could potentially help you get a few more sales per hour or per day. So you ask it, what is it about the current system that you like so much? What is it like? How do you know that it's working so well? Like, help me understand. I've never sold a thing in my life. Help me understand. Right? And with that, that's the invitation to start. Basically, you transition to a discovery conversation at that point. But now, again, you're trying to deactivate the haters, so to speak, right? So that you don't have visible, audible detractors. Because that's what's going to kill your adoption. If the person that they look up to is like, this thing sucks,
and they just shout in,
I don't need it, then everybody from, if they're at the 70th percentile, everybody from 69 to 0 is going to be like, yeah, I guess I don't need it if he doesn't need it. So that's really what you're trying to dig out. And then if you could get them to open up their hands, then you could be like, okay, so what type of a data science solution would help you in this current system that in your mind is working? And then you might find a new use case. Or you might kind of get them to realize that they actually need the thing, you just didn't package it correctly. Right? So that's the biggest objection you're going to get, is the status quo is good enough. And you got a whole bunch of different ways around that. Now, you do sales, you got more sales experience than I do. this is like my current widget's better than the widget you're selling me, or my current widget is good enough. What's your tactic there? How are you getting around that?
Okay, so there are a few things, like it's very tactical, right?
Yeah. We're in tactics mode.
Yes. So one thing to remember, and this is like a guiding light that you can use, that whenever you can double some sort of pleasure or cut some pain in half, that's what tends to be the dividing line between people not really caring and them getting intrigued enough to lean in. Okay. Now, it does require some intentional thought. It's like, okay, how can I credibly find something that can actually be potentially doubled, right? Now, will you actually end up doubling their conversion rate, or will you actually end up, not necessarily, but you need to think in that box. What can I aim for that I can either double or cut in half, right? So that's very important, because otherwise people just don't really care. So that's one.
That's great. Let's make sure double the upside or cut the pain in half. Like that's such a beautiful heuristic. It's like you need 7 impressions to make it so 7, right? For the repetition. There's another one, like if you want to get promoted, you need to have at least 5x positive ROI. So if you cost the company $200,000, you need to put at least $1 million on the bottom line to be in contention for a promo. I think take him for what he is, but like Grant Cardone says 10x. Yeah. So like these heuristics are so helpful. So you've got a great one: 2x the upside or 50% the downside. Sorry to interrupt, but I want to magnify it because that's something that people they can burn that right into their brain and they won't lose that one. So,
absolutely, and you're right. So there's a reason why you can often see like 10x. Now the 10x stuff, in my experience, that's more like even on the marketing funnel side. Even there, I think often it can get a little bit, like people can call it out that it's probably BS. Yeah. But doubling something, first of all, I think you should be aiming at that for your clients. Like double that value, cut their pain in half. It's a good ambition to have, and it's more credible. And especially in a corporate environment, that's something that you can credibly sell. So it's a useful heuristic.
Oh yeah. I mean, for fun fact, like our model, the top grouping wins at double the rate of the average. It's coincidental, like double just came up. Yeah. And it's a great, if you build it up well, it's like, would it be inconceivable? Would it be ridiculous to actually double that thing? You see? Yeah. Whatever you're looking at, if you build it up the right way, people will say, actually, it's not ridiculous. Right.
Let's see how we can make it happen. So
beautiful, no question. By the way, Voss would be proud.
No, it's not my first rodeo, is it? Right. So that's one. Now the other question that not even a question. It's even just a phrase that I found very useful. Maybe we can explore it a little bit. Is saying that if you could wave the magic wand. The magic wand, right? Now that really puts people in this kind of different fantasy space where those internal objections, but it's impossible, but it's but no, now actually I have a magic wand. People with the magic wand in their hands, now they are more willing to entertain ideas. That's actually, for me, that was a huge thing, because how I tend to think and speak, that I love to do thought experiments, and I love to do them real time, and I love to do them in the middle of a conversation. And people are like, oh, what are you even talking about? And I'm like, oh, no, I'm actually just kind of exploring a liminal space here. But if you say that, hey, if you get away with the magic wand, it can get people to think about the potentiality. And that's when you can actually close the gap between what you're actually offering and the realistic expectations from that and what people actually desire. Right?
Got it. Okay.
So again, very tactical, but that tension is something that you will come up against. You try to tell your story, you try to paint your vision, but people are just not following. Use the magic wand.
No, it's a good idea, yeah.
Tell them that, hey, if you could wave the magic wand. So those would be two things. Now, with regards to objection handling. So objection handling, there are two types of objections. I mean, there are a million ways you can look at it, but there are spoken and unspoken.
Yeah.
Okay, so spoken objections, the anatomy of an objection handling. If it's a spoken objection, it always starts with some sort of acknowledgement. I completely understand how you feel. And not just, if you can, don't just say, I completely understand how you feel, but actually reaffirm and repeat, ideally reiterate with different words what they just said to communicate that I'm actually getting the message.
That's
huge opportunity.
Mirroring, by the way.
Yeah.
Shout out the books.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mirroring, if you do have good domain knowledge and you feel confident, you can actually even develop that further, and huge gains in trust. You can actually get someone an objection. You can easily turn it in 30 seconds into something where thank God that objection happened, because now you're in a much better spot, right? So acknowledge it, and then usually turn it into a question. So you always try to end it with a question. So with that, I completely understand how you feel. Now, if you could do X, Y, and Z, would it be ridiculous? Right? So again, you can use a Vossian kind of judo move here, where an objection as it's handled and put away, actually what you want to do is not necessarily even change their minds right there and then, but put them back on the learning track. You see? That's what you want to do with it. That's how you want to eliminate it. So you kind of suck out the air. You really acknowledge that you're on the same page. You understand what they just said is absolutely valid, but bring them back into the space of the potential and the possibility of things changing, and ideally changing in a way when they can double the pleasure or cut discomfort in half, right? So it's important to know with the objection handlings. I know that even with sales guys, they think that what they need to do right there and then is to change someone's mind. It's just, it does not work that way. You got to bring them back into their minds are changeable dimension. Yeah. So those are my. Oh, and then also when you have these are the spoken objections. When you have unspoken objections, so the unspoken objections, that more has to do with everything that we're talking about, because a well-structured interaction with the right kind of discovery phase, with the right kind of story deployed with the right narrative structure, what it actually does is that it avoids and eliminates objections throughout the entire journey without anyone uttering an objection at any point in time, right? So those are the two ways. One, you handle by good strategic navigation and planning of the entire interaction so that those objections don't even come up, or before they come up, they're actually put to rest. Or if it's a spoken objection, then acknowledge, turn it into a Vossian question so that we can learn again and and be open to our model being updated. Feel free to ask questions around this if you think that more needs to be explored.
No, I mean it's very high clarity, and so I don't have a question per se. But one of the things that you talk about unspoken objections, again going back to Voss, is labeling, which allows you to maybe pull it into the world, own it, and then if they're like, yeah, that's right, I was feeling that, but I haven't articulated that yet, at least you can grapple with it. Right. And so that's why, and your seasoning as someone like that. Again, that's the difference between me with 20 years of experience and one of my junior colleagues who has not even 20 months of experience. I know preemptively what rocks to turn over, so to speak, or which corners to look around, while I'm trying to go from there's a business objective to there's a data science project to now we have to launch the capability. I try to show them here's how I'm bushwhacking through this so that they know, okay, I have to thrush the bushes before I step on them in case there's a snake, right? All those different booby traps and stuff, or just hazards. But that's, unfortunately, that comes with time. Hopefully, again, this series will help people shortcut some of that. But that ability, especially unspoken advantage, to do the labeling, pull it out, and then once you can define it, then you can deal with it. And I think that's the only thing I would add there, because I forgot about unspoken objections. But yeah, you're right.
That's a great point, actually.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic point, because you're right 100%. So spoken, unspoken. So you're correct that there are unspoken objections that are actually right there. Everyone can smell them, feel them. Yeah. It's right there. Now that you can pull them out with that tactic of labeling and like an accusation audit almost, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's what he calls it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost like you do an accusation audit, and the thing you do to do that is labeling.
Yes.
So you label, for example, an emotion. What
Yeah.
feels like you guys are not confident that this thing can actually deliver the doubling of that prize, or actually you don't have confidence that it could actually eliminate, like, cut your pain in half. So that could be a good one, because what happens is often people then start to elaborate on that.
Yes.
Or even just say, no, I mean, not necessarily, all I'm saying is, but there is that thing, and then it allows you to deal with it. But again, even when that happens, then that objection now be put in the stream of the larger interaction itself. Because remember that your whole presentation or that sales conversation that you're having, whatever, that's what you're doing. You're going from A to B anyways. You're going from, here we are, we don't really understand the thing, we're not bought into the thing, we're not confident about the thing, we're not committed to the thing, definitely. And point B being that, no, we love it, we love the idea, we're confident that it can be delivered, we have clarity on what needs to be done, and guess what? We're going to sacrifice the resources, time, and money to actually do that. Those are the 2 points.
Yep.
And you're always going from A to B. So when these objections come out and you manage to tease them, I would just maybe to say that they don't obsess over needing to definitely handle that right there and then with jumping to that endpoint. No, it's enough if those things are out in the open and people are in a space where they can get that model updated. So just make sure that you're on that larger journey in general, and that these unspoken objections don't really cut things in half and you leave people behind. Right. You already want to be at B, but people are still stuck there because there's something bothering them.
Right. Agreed. And I think these objections and some of the stuff you said about doubling or halving.
Yep.
Halving. It's tough to say. I don't know. Cutting in half.
Cutting in half. Yeah.
Yes, there we go. A metric half, not an imperial one.
That's another conversation.
Is getting into the management process, because this is the same fundamental goal. I have a thing and I want it to get adopted. Now, because they're so similar, I think we can kind of, this will be relatively quick. What I want to highlight is where these things do differ. Okay, but fundamentally, it's you have a thing and you want that thing to be used. So the goal is ultimately to get that senior leader to kind of co-sign your widget, and the widget becomes part of the process. So it's not something like, here's a contrast. In the current world, I'll go back to my last role. In the current world, they would build a sales plan. And the sales plan was not exactly this, but close enough where I don't think I'm misrepresenting. How many RFPs did we get last year? Where did they come from? And okay, inflate that by 5%. That's our sales plan for this year. And then we said, here's the Disney for salespeople. You can find all your prospects and you can build more sophisticated target lists. And some people were like, great, I'm going to use this in my sales plan. And some people were like, nah, I'm just going to use the old method. It's not broke, don't fix it. So what we're trying to do is get the senior most person to say, no, I want your sales plan to show me how you looked at the prospecting tool and how you're identifying brokers and or prospects that will be top of the list for you this year. That's when you're in the process, because then there's 15 markets, there were like 30 whatever sub markets, and it's like, okay, well, now I've got 30 people using it. So now I am the process. I've become indispensable, right? They got a tattoo. They got a data science tattoo now. They can't get rid of it. So like that's the best, because now you don't have, like, you could stop focusing your energy on hand-to-hand combat. You want to try my widget. It's like one win to rule them all, but it's a difficult win, because you want to talk about being safely ignorable. Like, doesn't get much more than the like SVP of commercial, and I'm like, hey, mister, could you please tell all of the like 6,000 people that report to you to use my thing? Like, beat it, kid. I've got existential threats to deal with, right? So, but fundamentally, if we can get there, if we can pierce the veil, pierce the croc brain, then it's one win to rule them all. So how do we do this? What's some of the differences? Well, there's actually several things in common that make this a little bit easier. It's just the stakes are higher, right? So social proof, you still need it, but instead of me going to like sales director down in like Miami, I'm rolling it up several levels to maybe like a territory leader or something. Because when I go to the SVP of commercial, he's going to look at the VP of sales ops or the VP of markets or VP of a market or a territory. And it's like, okay, are you guys cool with this? And if they're like, yeah, of course we're cool with this, then the SVP says, yes, now it's part of the process. So it's the same idea. It's just you're like working your way up. I call it grapevining, right? Because vines, they spin up poles. So I reach out to my peer. Hey, try this. Tell me what you think. Oh, I like it. Okay, great. Would you be opposed? No question. To getting me in front of your market boss? Now you've got like multiple sales directors in their sphere of influence. What do you think? This is great. But they don't say, they don't use it. So they turn down to their lieutenant. Hey, is this cool? They're like, oh, this is legit. Okay, great. My whole market's now committed. Okay, great. Would you be opposed to introducing me to the territory guy? The territory guy. Hey, territory guy. Now you've got multiple markets. You got multiple sales directors. What's he going to do? He's going to look at, oh, cool demo, but he's not a user. He turns to the market president. Not a user. Turns to the sales guy. A user. Okay, great. Now you've got somebody with enough clout that you can potentially pierce the SVP of commercial veil. 3 of those 4 levels are not users. In fact, probably 4 of those 4, because the director's not selling anymore. So it's really like the account executive who needs it, right? But if I go straight to the SVP, I through some twist of fate, I get a meeting with him. And, hey, I got this thing. I'm gonna do a demo. Cool demo. Who's using it? We haven't launched it yet. I want you to make this part of the official process. I need to de-risk it, because at that level, the cost of being wrong is so much bigger than the benefits of being right usually. So why don't you go push it down and come back up in 6 months after you've like de-risked the hell out of it. But if you just kind of start, maybe he's got like 5 tributaries that kind of come back to him, get one of them lit up, and then you could potentially get him. So social proof is still paramount. It's just, you got to get the yes before the meeting. You don't want to, if you're going to die off screen. That's where it comes into play here. And then the second, and this is where the doubling and cutting in half thing comes from. If you want to get through the veil, you've got to scale up, but you've got to scale up credibly. So here's the thing. If you're a sales director and you manage 20 people, and I've got a widget that's going to get you 100,000 sales per desk, incremental sales per desk, at that person's level of responsibility where they still see the desks, that metric's probably enough. Okay? But if I go up, 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 and I say 100,000 sales per desk, unless sales per desk is a KPI that he's constantly monitoring, that's not the right metric. But if I say, hey, I found a leak that in aggregate, now it's $80 million. Okay, 80 million might be big enough for him, right? So all I did was alter the resolution. So it's the same phenomenon. One desk, more sales. But now this guy's managing thousands of desks indirectly through his organization. So roll it up. 80 million. Yeah, I have an $80 million problem. Or did you know you have an $80 million problem and I've got the solution for it? Whoa. Last year, my total sales was 400. That's a big percentage. Let's talk, right? So this is the, like you're rolling up or you're zooming out to match his perspective, because you're speaking in his language. He's managing an entire P&L. He's not managing desk to desk. So if you frame it in a desk, again, unless that's the metric he does measure, you have to know your audience. But like if they don't, if they're just like, in aggregate, we sold $400 million, whatever, right? Like that's, you got to speak at his layer, speak at his level, right? Because he's got to make 100 decisions that day. He's got 20 meetings that day. So do you want him to make the $100,000 decision or the $80 million decision? It's the same decision. Will you make this data science widget part of the core process? Yes or no? well, it's not worth my time. Like it cost the company $100,000 for you to speak to me because that multiplication operation is not, he's not making that multiplication operation. But if you're like, it's 80 million bucks in aggregate. Oh, okay. It was worth it. So, and then another thing you can do again with these guys, because they want to de-risk. So you've rolled it up so you can see it's a sufficiently big thing on the seesaw, right? You're putting an $80 million rock on the other side of the seesaw. If you can, quote an expert. This is a Cialdini technique. Well, according to McKinsey or according to blah, 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 this is table stakes for our industry. For some reason, if you tell somebody that the thing you have is table stakes, that is like an existential threat. Like, it doesn't, it punches above its weight class in terms of severity. So if I say, well, you know, having a model that predicts likelihood to win is table stakes in mature sales organizations, according to this McKinsey paper, that doesn't, like, for some reason, that is like so powerful and doesn't come, like, if you read that sentence in the written words, you're like, yeah, it doesn't seem like it would be, but that's devastating. So these are ways to like augment what we just talked about for launching, right? And it's really just about making it palatable for the executive audience, like the true executive audience.
And I think that actually this, like what we just talked about, this might have been the most important 20 minutes of the Data Storytellers podcast, I would say, in general.
We buried it in the middle so that they have
to... exactly. Because you see, I mean, I saw this before, but what I was also taking notes about is when it comes to like change management, the main challenge for data analyst leaders, and we spoke with tens of thousands of them over the past 10 years, you know, we work with most of the FD 500, we work with all of the FD 10, and all that is change management. And I'm not saying anything new, change management. And then there are so many aspects of it. And this actually came out of the masterclasses too. In fact, the one that you attended, I mean, you attended two of them, but one that you attended, there was a gentleman from MasterCard there. And he said, look, with the change management thing, we've been trying everything. We were trying bottom up. We've been trying top down. The problem was that when we built things bottom up, we gave some to the users, but, you know, it's kind of like build it and they kind of come, mostly don't come, and they just kind of remain stale. And we tried to come from on top, and we did all this work, got the meetings, got very difficult, but we got those commitments, and these mandates were issued, and it just died off, right? It's just no one actually used it. It was kind of a failure. So do I go from bottom up or do I go from top down? What is the direction of influence that I need to apply? And his main light bulb after the masterclass was that it's both. It's both. Now, what you're saying here is the actual roadmap of how you do the both, because the right way is to go from the bottom, but keep going up. You see, so get those commitments, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but doing that whole journey of going like one level up, you delight one layer, you speak their language, you find their KPIs, you speak into that, you deliver the value, you succeed in the full fulfillment, the whole shebang, you get their attention, you manage to get the commitment, you fulfill, the fulfillment is there, it provides value, then you get the mandate to go one level up. Of course, that needs to be done by you, though. You need to ask the question of would you be opposed to introducing me your territory manager? Find the KPI at that level, and during that whole process, even your solution will become much sharper, and it will cover more ground. It will be more optimized. By the time you get to the top, that whole de-risking is complete. Correct? And then this is how you can lock in, because also people say, how can I make data analytics and data science really a part of the fabric of the business? How can I seam it into the business processes themselves? And that's exactly how you do it. So I love it, because this is the roadmap for the bidirectional influence that actually drives that change in the business and achieves that outstanding adoption that everyone is looking for. And I love because it's very simple. On a strategic level, it's as neat as it can be, and it does have each like tactical step for the execution. I just wanted to put it into perspective.
Yeah, and the the thing I would pull on this, or the thread I would pull out of this, is it is both, but both feels like a cop-out. So the distinction is it's a vine going up a single pole. Yeah. So if you think about the way that most corporate structures are, you have like one singular head, and then they have lieutenants, and then they have lieutenants, and then they have lieutenants, and then and it keeps going on and on and on. So like at that bottommost layer, there might be thousands of people. You don't have to saturate the entire bottom layer before you move on to the next layer, right? It's like, okay, Bob has 3 directs. Can I just work with his 3 directs? Okay, do you guys like this enough to go talk to Bob? Yes, okay. Now, or get one person that likes it, talk to Bob, now you get the 3. Talk to Bob. Bob will be your glowing endorsement to Bob's boss, Stacy. Bob has 3 peers. Stacy loves it. Now, Stacy will cascade it down to saturate everything. Hey, Stacy, can you help me go up a level to Frank? Frank's got 4 Stacys. Frank will then saturate and push it down. So it's you're winning. You're constantly winning, and you're constantly like working your way to Zoom, but you're not saturating an entire layer. Because if you have to saturate the entire layer, you're never going to get done with the base layer. And even if you did, by the time you finished, these guys probably forgot, and then you got to start the whole process. It's not like a typewriter where it's like line break, right? You have to think like a vine. The vine is not trying to get all the ground cover before it goes up of a pole. Like if you visit like a vineyard, my friend when I was growing up had a vineyard, like a little micro vineyard. You could make like 2 barrels of wine per year, but it was multiple poles. And then the scaffold, whatever, the trellising across the top, that it would work. But the vines weren't greedy. It was like, okay, I'm just going to follow this one thing, and I'm totally fine, and I'm going to make grapes, right? It wasn't like you had this massive ground cover before it started to go up. You don't have to do that. Find one column and just go up. Eventually, they all lead to that SVP. If you need to go to the S, maybe you don't have to pick a layer and then just work up one branch, because every time you get to a node, you actually saturate the layer. Because you've turned them into the sphere of influence. Within your sphere of influence, this is the status quo. Can you help me go up one layer on the sphere to another sphere of influence? Yeah, sure. Then it becomes the status quo. That's the way to do it organizationally. As much as I enjoy some of the trench warfare of getting eight directors or 10 directors or 13 directors to like me and like my product, and I think it does help to really sharpen the product itself. If you want to really drill into the status quo, you just got to follow one branch to the top, and then every time you get a win, let them do the cascading.
It's really the 80-20, right? It's always like 80-20. Just 20% that needs to get done to get 80% of what I need to progress this. And then the holy grail at the top is the big dog actually mandating it. And at that point, actually everything is already in place. You make it easy for that person to do that.
Yeah, this doesn't quite fit, but it's one of those write it down. It's your adoption / compliance to anything is directly proportional to the ease of adoption or compliance. So if you can de-risk it,
can you repeat that too?
The level of adoption or compliance, depending on which one you're looking at, that you will achieve is directly proportional to how easy you make it to comply or adopt. So, and this is something that sometimes I forget, but if the easiest way to think about it is click paths. If my data science widget is hidden behind 2 clicks in Salesforce, it may as well not exist. It has to be on the surface. This is like an Edward Tufte principle. So that's for data science adoption. For process compliance, for an expense report, if your expense report process sucks and it's hard and it takes an inordinate amount of time or a disproportionate amount of time, then people are not going to comply with it. They're going to seek ways to cut corners, and it's going to make everything worse. So you want to make it easy. So for example, when I was at PwC, the credit card was linked to the expense system, so I never had to upload a receipt. It was just there. especially the big ticket items. Like it knew somehow how to pull the travel itinerary, so I never had to like, okay, let me just get the whatever. Or the folios for hotels because they wanted to, I know, did you get something from the minibar? Right, it's all there. Never. So it's all I had to do was basically like hit the button. It would pull it in. I would look to make sure there were no errors, and then it was easiest expense system ever. CVS did not have as mature of a system, so like attaching receipts was a super annoying process. And so it's like, all right, what's the like maximum no receipt needed? Okay, well that's what. You start to see that, and like you can see in the data. With the other thing, or if we make it really difficult to enter a sales opportunity in the Salesforce because it's got 50 required fields, guess what? None of your like actual pipeline is in there, and so you have this big black box of no pipeline, and then suddenly it gets entered and won the same day. Really, with a 3-month procurement cycle, you were able to open and close in the same day? No, of course not. But they didn't want to deal with the rigmarole. So the compliance is proportional to the ease of compliance. Adoption is proportional to the ease of adoption. So you make it easy for them, they'll adopt it. So, and then you can cascade. Okay.
So I love this, and especially because now it's interesting that you put the compliance element in there. There's a bunch of people who are listening. I mean, that would be like a wide range. There will be the VPs of data science. There will be senior directors of analytics. There will be a bunch of people, I can tell you right now, who are heads of data strategy and governance, or heads of data governance. This might be like left field, but I wonder what you think. Is this playbook just as applicable to driving data governance compliance than it is relevant to driving adoption of a data science app, data science Drupal app?
As much as I would love to say yes, I am criminally ignorant of the non-data science portions of my craft. So I don't know. I'm going to say I don't know. I'm going to say this in public so everyone could be, oh, that's a guy who says he doesn't know when he doesn't.
That's why I asked. I just wanted to reaffirm the confidence.
Yeah. I'm like borderline stupid when it comes to data engineering and data governance. All I know is like, don't divulge the sensitive stuff. So no, I don't have enough of a background here to have an informed opinion. I'd like to say it would, but I can't say that with the same conviction that I could say it'll help your data science stuff get out there. So.
Got it. Because we work with a bunch of data strategy and governance. I wouldn't have asked if my intuition was not that 100%, with some caveats. So I think it has to do with carrot and stick always. Yeah. In governance, it's more on the stick side because it's harder to find the carrots. So that's one. Plus, with the direction of the influence, you might need to rely on a little bit more of the mandated stuff, but because of the nature of the thing, all I'm saying is that you might just need to mix some of these tactics and need to change the ratios, but the same idea could work. I will validate this with a bunch of our members.
There you go.
Okay, so this is great stuff.
We still got objections though, so let's talk through these objections. Then we might have exhausted the time for today, and we'll get to staking a claim and discovery next week. But common objections again, you're going to get status quo works, right? You're going to get that change management type of or change resistance rather. Now, with this, he's not the user, and because he's not the user, some of those like a direct appeal to ego type stuff where it's like, oh, how do you know it works? Or like, we're just trying to make everybody as great as you are. That's sort of doesn't make sense, right? Like, I just want everyone to sell as well as you do. I haven't sold in 10 years. I'm in management, right? So like that's not there. But you can still pivot and start using your McCraney toolkit. So it's, oh, how do you know it's working? Like what are you looking at that tells you everything's great? All systems green, right? You have to pitch it respectfully. Don't, come across as like you're trying to trick them or trap them. But again, what are they looking at that makes them confident that they don't need to change anything? So maybe they'll say, oh, you told me it's $80 million, but I sold $1 billion last year. And you're like, oh, okay, well, 80 million felt like a big deal, but I guess not. right? So things of that nature. Or, you're focusing on, say, new members. We're focusing on profit per member. So you're solving the wrong problem. I don't have a problem getting them in. My problem is getting the right ones in. So can you help me with that? Oh, now I can go work on the right problem for this highly influential person. So it's really, how do you know this everything's great? Like, what are you looking at? But you can go a little bit further, right? Because they'll say something. Oh, let's say it's just a different KPI, or they think, oh, no, like my sales are fine. Okay. What would you do if you had a high fidelity, high accuracy piece of evidence that suggested that whatever that KPI was lower than it needed to be or lower than it could be? Right. So we'll go back to the fill ratio. 30% fill ratio is actually great. So 30% of the time you win, that's a wonderful win ratio in sales. Some people, that's fine. I'm fine with that. My goal is to get more sales opportunities. I'll just keep winning them at 30%. Mm-hmm. All right. What if I could show you demonstrably that it could be as high as 60%? So pipeline doesn't grow, you've doubled your total sales. How would you run the business differently if I could convince you that we can double the fill rate, the win rate? Get them prime them to update their operating model, because it never occurred to me that there's a world where I could sell it twice the fill rate, right? And then the last one for this specific objection, which is the status quo is fine. You'd be like, you've been in the game for a long time. Tell me about a time that you did oversee a change, or you did facilitate a change, or you were the driver of a change to get us to this golden status quo. Maybe don't say golden because that might come across as sarcastic, but we're in this status quo. You say that it's working. Have you seen before this? What led to this? Oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. So what triggered the change to get to this regime? This operating model. What happened? What was the catalyst? It was blah, blah, blah. What were the barriers back then? What was the case for change back then? How did we get here? Because you may be able to, again, you're trying to unlock their brain so that they can be open to change. Oh, well, actually, maybe this time is not so different from that time. And we did have to stay with the current state. Again, you're like, oh, according to McKinsey, this is table stakes. Well, 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago, you didn't have the table stakes. Now you have the old table stakes. Now it's time to once again get the new table stakes. So you again help them because they've probably been through that journey. Now, if they're a brand new executive and they just don't want to make a mistake, this isn't going to really work. But if it's like, oh, I've been at this company for 20 years, I built it from the ground up. Great. I highly doubt you've never gone through a change before. So let's talk about some other changes, or how did we get here, right? If we take for granted that this status quo is working, how did we get here? Because it's unlikely that we started at perfection, so to speak. Again, language is you gotta be very careful with the language, but that's how you, at the senior executive level, how you would say, okay, status quo works. Okay. Now, there's a different way that they might challenge you, which is related to this, which is this doesn't agree with my strategy. This doesn't support my strategy. So this is different because you're affecting change, but it's more of an operational change. Instead of using pencils, we're going to use pens now. Whatever stupid example you get, or instead of just copy paste the funnel from last year and multiply it by 10%. We're going to actually take an extra step to do some mining for clients. That's a change, operational change. But this is different because sometimes our recommendations, sometimes our insights are going in a different direction. You're going to go to movie theaters instead of grocery stores, right? And so this, again, McCraney, because now it's a battle of the truths with an S. So, hey, what's the strategy based on? How did you guys come up with the strategy? Okay. Be very, tread lightly because, again, these are a bunch of very highly compensated executives who came up with it. They didn't just we're going to go into the grocery stores this year. So you have to like pull it out, but pull it out delicately. I've had an executive bite my fingers because I was trying to like, how did you come up with that? How dare you question me? Like, I'm trying to learn, bro. But like, oh, that was like a disaster.
It's done at that stage.
At that point, you're DOA, right?
It's irredeemable. Yeah.
But if you have enough rapport in the rapport bank because you've been building relationships, trying to keep positive rapport. Like, how did the strategy? Like, what's the strategy? Like, help me understand how the strategy was developed. Like, what do you guys? What did you look for? Because I have a blind spot. Like, help me be better at this, right? And then again, same McCraney attack. Okay, well, how would the strategy be different if this were true, whatever this is, or if this were wrong, right? We go after grocery stores because that's the single biggest throughput of soda. Okay, that's valid. What how would your strategy change if we had good evidence that grocery stores are flat and slightly shrinking and movie theaters are way up, or if margins were way up or whatever, right? How would you alter your strategy if I could show you something that you never thought about before? And then that may or may not get you anywhere, but what else you could say is like, okay. How can we augment or complement? So let's say we take a step back on our side, because again, we don't know everything, right? It's our truth and their truth. I have a capability that if you strip away the answer, it does this. You can ask a question. So the question that we initially asked it was, what's the highest growth area? Which was movie theaters. Okay, fine. That's not the right question. So what question would help you in your strategy the most? So this does require a little bit of scrapping what you've built. You got to murder your babies. I think that's creative writing. Because you fall in love with your work, right? But it's better to have something that's not your baby, but is widely adopted, than your baby in the corner where nobody's using it. So, what, Mr. Senior Executive, would be the most valuable thing that I could answer? I have a question answering apparatus. It's the magic wand thing. It's that you just brought up. Same idea. In fact, someone used that same example in a masterclass. She's like, first thing you like to do, magical piece of paper, answers any question you want. What question you asking it? Because that's the device that she uses.
Yeah, super powerful, because it just suspends disbelief, if that's the saying. It puts people in that spot, but they just open up. And if you wave the magic wand, what kind of answers would you want answers? What kind of questions would you want answers for right now?
And then the last objection, and this is the one that I used to hate the most because of just the technology wasn't there yet. But you'll have an executive who's like, listen, I can't trust your data science until I can see what's inside of it. You have to open the black box. Now with like linear regression or logistic regression, it's right there. But anything more sophisticated than that, random forest, XGBoost, and so on and so on, it is a black box. Deep learning, black box. So there's two ways you can overcome this. If you're Mr. Claff, hot shot, you're doing them a favor type of vibe, you could say, hey, you've probably driven your car from your home to the office and you don't understand the inner workings of the internal combustion engine. But here we are, and you're able to use it without understanding it. What's the difference between that and this? Right? Or you go to a restaurant, you get a really complicated dish, you don't know how to prepare it, but you can still enjoy it. What's the difference? Right? My job as the technician is to make sure that this is safe and trustworthy. You're a consumer, you have an iPhone, you have all these things, all of these wonders of technology that you could never create on your own. But you trust it and use it, and you have great outcomes. Why is that different from this piece of technology, which is the data science? Difficult to land. Don't get me wrong. You can't just like meekly throw this out there because you're going to sound like a jerk. So you have to know you can land it. However, we don't have to land it if you don't feel like you can, because, and if anyone doesn't know this, here's tactics. you can use. This is pure tech. The 4 books don't cover this either. Gather in, kids. We're gonna get some really arcane stuff here. Not really, but there's a package. There's a technique. It's Shapley. Okay, it's Guy Shapley. The package is called like Shap or something like that. It decomposes black box models. So, random forest. Why did you say it was a zig instead of a zag? It'll tell you what it was doing. These attributes were pushing it towards zig. These attributes were pushing it towards zag. That's why we landed on zig versus zag. Works for XGBoost. In fact, it's better for XGBoost than it is for random forest. I find it takes a long time to converge on random forest. The point is, and this is just one of them, but there's like a whole field called like explainable machine learning, of which Shap, in my opinion, is like the crown jewel. But data science professionals, data storytellers, those with models or modelers that you manage, you no longer have to choose between open box, low power, black box, high power. Look into Shap. It's like SCHAPLEY. We'll put it in the book. But that opens the box. So if you end up with that objection, I can't, trust my precious organization or my precious operations to your black box wizardry, fine, I'll open the box for you. There you go. This is what the model was thinking. And it's Shapley, explainable machine learning. So all these objections, completely solvable. Sorry, I know you want to get in there. I'll let you get in there for how you sell into senior executives. Like what unique objections does like the SVP bring that like the director doesn't? But that's the wrap up for what I had to bring in for that one.
So I love it. Now, okay, 2 things. So explainable machine learning. So is it something that you can or should prepare in advance, you think, kind of like a flash roll, or is it something that no, we're actually going to together open the box here?
It's not flash rolly. It's more like you can offer it, or you could say like we always, we're big on transparency. So here's like the proposed UX design, and the UX design might be something like, here's the outcome, the answer, and then here's like the top 6 drivers behind that answer. So that's what we did with our latest model. It was like, okay. We just led with the drivers to be more transparent. But flash roll, the flash roll is more like you drive a car but you don't know how to build one, or you don't know how combustion works. That's more flash rolly, because that's like you're with a professional, bro. Yeah. We don't have to have a black box. We can open it up and make it highly approachable. That's more just like, I'm not going to try to flash roll you. I'm just going to try to be as generous as I can with my initial offer.
That's exactly why I asked. You see, because another Claffian thing, just to mention a little bit of neurobiology here, neurochemistry, is that attention and influence, conviction often comes from what we call push-pull, which is essentially adrenaline and norepinephrine. Mm-hmm. So basically, when you push someone away, that creates attention. But then when you pull them back, that's when, okay, now we can rest in this new transformation that just took place. Maybe the model got updated, or you got someone's buy-in for something. So here's why I'm saying it. It's because when you do give the, hey, well, you drive your car and you don't know how a combustion engine works, that's like a little bit of a push. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So you kind of like, oh, okay. All right. It's best if it's followed by a pull. And I think that the explainable machine learning is a perfect pull for this, because
that's a good way to tie them together. Yeah, I was treating them as separate and distinct tactics, but you're right. That's actually like a good way to like
this is
be a little bit mean
like...
and then bring them in for a hug. Yeah.
Exactly, because you could say, well, look, let me explain this. I today got in my car and I drove all the way, and I have no idea how a combustion engine works. So you actually, instead of saying that, hey, you don't know, you're driving and you don't know how it works. Now I did drive, and I'm super ignorant about the combustion engine, right? But I trust it. Or you bring another example too. You could even bridge it saying that and this is an extra that I might put in here. I don't know if it would, what would you say to that? But you say, but I see cards working all the time, right? I trust it. Well, machine learning is like that because it works in X, Y, and Z situation. You can bring specific examples if you'd like. You know, the other.
No, I think it's a nice way to smooth out the push. Yeah, I like
smooth out the push, and then, but you know what? You know, this is what I do. If you'd like to, I could talk about this all day. I can show you exactly how it works. I can open up the box. It's essentially what it is that, you know, X influences Y, blah, 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 but I can show you exactly how that maps onto the specific data that you have. My instinct is that it would eliminate 95%. 95% would say, gotcha. I get it. I get the concept. You showed me roughly how it works. That's all the depth that I was looking for. And you would get like a few people, you know what? I actually would want to look at that. But I think with those, it would also just be like, okay, that person just for some reason is actually very interested. So might as well show
people like
right?
to geek out. Yeah.
So what do you think about that playbook?
No, I love that because it's like you first of all, by rerouting it back to yourself, you avoid, because like saying you in a potential, not like heated, like you hate each other, but just it's a tense situation.
Yep.
That is like throwing a punch, right? So I remember having to mediate people, and I was like, please, for the love of God, don't say the word you. I know it's awkward, but just don't say the word you. Use other words.
Trigger people.
Yeah. And then, to trigger the defensiveness. I was like, hey, I don't know how a combustion engine works. I can drive to the office. I don't know how my phone or Grubhub works, but I could feed us all right now if we needed to, right? So we use things we don't understand all the time. The fact that when the models work because of, again, X, Y, and Z, like, I think that that's a nice way to refine this tactic. And basically put that one objection, the I need to see what's in the box, to bed forever. The other ones, like status quo is good enough. Can't really put that one to bed forever and ever. And it disagrees with my strategy. You can't put that to bed forever and ever because that's kind of almost like their job. But this one where they're like, I can't trust a black box. I think this we can have this one. Now it's a flash roll. Now it's we
turn it into a flash roll
small enough to fit on a flash roll. So
and might I add that the objection itself. So if people want to say no, I want to see how it works. And again, this is where you need to kind of handle your own ego, because often what it means, and the person doesn't even know, is what they are saying is that I don't trust you.
Yeah, you're right. 100%.
So that's why the answer for it is not necessarily, oh, I need to show the actual black box, because that's actually not the objection. The objection is that I don't trust you. So now you can demonstrate that, no, I'm a living, breathing human being. Let me speak your language. It's the car and the combustion engine. You take on the responsibility in the whole thing, but I'm very open. Absolutely. I love this stuff. You're in the hands of a professional. I can show you all this stuff if you'd like. Right?
Yep.
That's how you handle the actual objection, because people say, okay, got it.
Yeah. You're also vaguely threatening them with a much longer, much drier meeting.
Exactly. Almost like call that bluff.
If you don't comply, we're going record by record, variable by variable, and I'm going to bury you.
You can even say something like that, right? It's like, essentially, this is what it is. Essentially is X influences Y, but no problem. I can show you in detail. Shouldn't take more than 30, 45 minutes. We can go through the whole thing. As you could even say that it shouldn't take more. I could talk about this stuff all day. Right. And then the person would say, "Well, hope you won't." So
you're like, let's get together on a Saturday. That way there's no distractions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You could even say, honestly, I think if you're hitting the right energy there, you could even say this tongue in cheek, and both of you know what's happening, and say, no, yeah. I got you. I'm all good. All right, and that was the last objection in this particular
scenario,
right?
Yeah. So I think just to tie us off, because we've been going for a while now.
Always happens. Yeah.
Next time we're not going to do summaries. We're just going to jump.
No. So next time you tune in, if you haven't been following,
it's going to feel We're just going to start. I'm going to say hi next time. We're just going to get right into it.
But you and I always speak for half an hour about random stuff before we start recording. So.
Well, it's a podcast. It's not a presentation. So
yeah, absolutely. But what's coming? So maybe we can talk about just quickly what's coming.
So what is coming? So we have 2 more scenarios where you are in the subordinate role as the data professional. So the first is going to be staking a value claim. The second is going to be discovery. Arguably the worst and hardest scenario to ever be in. And then potentially one of the more fun, because it's like
Discovery,
data, story, analytics. Like we like to learn. So like that's the learning framework. After we get through that should just be one more episode. We're going to hold ourselves to that one.
And we'll tie it together also with the sales scenario. I think at that point,
yeah, sales is like every single time. Like we always have like the generic sales is like the like the platonic form of whatever we're doing. It comes out. The after that, we're going to move into the superordinate roles, which is probably a single episode, which is basically just ways to think through leadership of data science professionals, analytics professionals. And then closing it out is this like asynchronous communication, like how to tell stories when it's not live. So we'll potentially have a whole bunch of cool visuals. We'll see how that works with Riverside, but that'll be our like swan song for synthesis.
All right. Well, yeah, look forward to that. And as per usual, it's always longer than we anticipate.
It's always more fun than we anticipate.
Yeah, it's always more fun. So it's longer and more fun than we anticipate. So,
right.
Yeah, this is great. Again, a lot of like real time synthesizing happening as well, which I love.
Hegelian dialectics.
Yeah, exactly. If I want to use a big word, that's what I would have.
Yeah.
But I think we can tie this one up. It was a pleasure, sir. And then I'll see you next time, and we'll pick up from right here.
Yes, sir. No summaries next time. We're going right in.
None whatsoever. All right. See you.
Take care.